Over the past few days, I've been at a World War II festival here in England called We Have Ways Fest. And if you were to watch this channel, well, you would probably think that the only parts of history that I'm interested in are the Civil War, World War I, and World War II. And you would be excused for thinking about that because I go to a lot of those sites. But I'm kind of a naturally curious person and I'm interested in all kinds of things, which is why we have traveled up to the northern part of the country now. And I wanted to kind of dig into a little bit of history that I honestly don't know much about. So over the next couple of days, we are going to be exploring some of the sites of the Roman Empire that are located here in northern England. Like I said, we are in northern England, and specifically we are at Lake Windermere, which is a 10-mile long lake. It's the longest and largest natural lake in England. Beautiful place. And like I said, I wanted to come up here to learn a little bit more about the Roman Empire. I'll say right off the get-go that I'm not an expert when it comes to the Roman Empire, which is why I'm here, wanting to learn more. But when it comes to the Romans in England, here's what I do know. The history goes back pretty much to the Emperor Claudius. Emperor Claudius, his nephew Caligula, who was a bit of a freak, had been murdered, and Claudius ascended to the throne in 41 AD. He didn't exactly project strength. He had a little bit of deafness. He walked with a bit of a limp. This was in 41 AD. So to kind of assert his power in 43 AD, well, he launched an invasion of the British Islands. Started in the south, and over the next 45 years, the Romans kind of worked their way up to the northern part of the country. And one of the forts that they established was right here. The area of England where we are currently standing is called the Lake District, and you can see Lake Windermere there in the distance. Absolutely beautiful place. And when the Romans initially pushed up into the north, like in the 70s AD, they initially bypassed the Lake District and then had to make a retreat and move back down into this area kind of in roughly the 90s. Again, I'm still learning about all of this stuff myself. And the town where we are right now is called Ambleside. And the site, you can see some stones here in front of us. Well, this was the site of a fort that was located along the north side of Lake Windermere. And they have some graphic representations to kind of give us an idea of what the fort looked like. We're going to look at some more well-established ruins here in just a moment. But this is the eastern gate of the fort that was established here. So there was originally a wooden fort, and then under the rule of the Emperor Hadrian, which he ruled from 117 to 138, well, a more established stone fort would have been built here. So right here is where people would have entered from the east. So right here is the eastern gate where we were just standing. That's the main gate where people would have entered into the fort. And then the interior of the fort would have been right here where the most important buildings were. We're going to go take a look at that in just a moment. And then also inside the fort, kind of in this space right here, well, that's where you would have had the soldiers' barracks. And of course, any good fort is going to have a wall all around it to protect the inside. And on the corners, like what we see here, well, there would have been small towers. So the fort would have had rounded corners, and then you would have had these towers there that could offer a view of the surrounding countryside and the lake, as we see there in the background. So if you had enemy who were coming up from the lake, they could have been spotted by guards from this position right here. Or if there are, people coming up the lake, trading goods, you can get an alert to have people ready to go from right here. But anyway, here's some remnants of where the tower stood. Now, just because there was a wall here didn't mean that it was perfectly safe. There was a gravestone that was found close to the fort for a guy named Flavius Romanus, and it said on the stone that he was killed inside the fort by the enemy. So at some point there was an attack on this fort, and this particular soldier lost his life. A lot of people associate landmines with being something from the conflicts of the 20th century. But looks like we have some landmines here in this Roman fort as well. We've now moved to the center of the fort where the most important buildings would have been. I'll come back to this one here in just a moment, but we'll start over here. And this is just so fascinating to me. Being someone who is from the United States, if we have a building that's 200 years old or 250 years old, that's something that is almost ancient to us. So to see these surviving ruins from something in the Roman era during the time of Hadrian is just really, really something. Anyway, what we are looking at here is the Praetorium, or the commanding officer's house. So being the commanding officer, well, you're going to get a little bit nicer accommodations for you and your family. So visiting officials also would have stayed here. Again, would have been very large, would have had, probably around 12 smaller rooms, like what we see here, that were arranged around a central courtyard. So again, the soldiers' barracks were pretty small and pretty common, but these would have been definitely a lot nicer. Here in the middle of the fort was the Principia, or the headquarters, and this was the most important structure in the whole fort. So this is where the commanding officer would issue orders. This is where military plans and business was conducted. And as you made your way in, there would be something called a basilica, which was a high-roofed hall where gatherings could be held. They would administer justice there. And then, if you continued on, well, there would be a shrine. So you would have religious ceremonies that would take place here in this area. And I think that what we are looking at right here with this sunken room would be the treasury. So this is where the garrison's funds would be held, and the soldiers' money. There would have been gods who were thought to protect it and to keep thieves away. So yeah, this right here, where we are standing, is the most important part of the fort. If you have a fort that is housing around 500 soldiers, well, those guys have got to eat. And that's where this side of the fort comes in. This is the granary. And you might notice that the walls look to be a little bit thicker here on this side of the fort. Well, that's because the buildings here had to support a slate roof. So that was a little bit heavier, so you had to have a little bit thicker walls. You also would have had raised wooden floors on this side of the fort to encourage ventilation that could keep grain and other produce dry so it didn't spoil or go bad. So the granary buildings, which were called, I think it's pronounced Horia, there were two of them over here. Well, that would keep the food, that could keep the soldiers fed and nourished here at this fort on Lake Windermere. For someone who lives here, seeing these Roman forts and Roman walls and ruins is probably pretty commonplace, but for someone like me who is seeing it for the first time and who was eager to learn more about this era, this is super, super fascinating. Now, the Roman fort here at Ambleside was one of 3 forts along a Roman road or a trade route that went all the way to the ocean. So we're gonna hop in our vehicle, which has been an experience for me, learning how to drive a car with a steering wheel on the right side and then drive on the left-hand side of the road. And we are going to make our way down the road and hit these other places that were key along this route. Okay, so driving in England has been an adventure. This trip is my first time driving in this country. The wheel is on the wrong side of the car. I'm driving on the wrong side of the road. I know that British people are going to say that it's not the wrong side, that it's the right side, but no. And we have Ways Fest. Rob from History in Your Hand was with me, and I nearly killed that poor man like 5 times. But it has been so hard for me to wrap my brain around the change here. And we're driving some pretty narrow roads right now. As a matter of fact, some of the places is just wide enough to where if it was in the United States, like it would be just wide enough for my truck to get through. But anyway, the scenery through this part of the country is absolutely gorgeous. Dude. Okay, we have just made a stop along our drive here, and my gosh, this has been one of the most incredible drives I've ever made. I mean, this country is absolutely gorgeous. I have been loving every bit of this. And in between Lake Windermere and the sea, well, there was another Roman fort that was situated along the Roman road overlooking the Esk Valley that we're going to take a look at. It's called Hardknot. Seriously, I cannot get over the view here. If it had been the year 120 or 130, I've got to say, I don't think I would have minded a posting here if I was a Roman soldier. Now here in the distance, you can see the outer wall to the Hardknot Roman fort. We're going to go inside and take a quick look here in just a minute. This fort, again, set along the Roman road, which was a major trade route through here. And for whatever reason, this fort didn't stay in service for very long. Really is about 20 years. So really during the rule of Hadrian is when this fort would have seen action. And then after that, it just really kind of fell out of use. So it may be that it was seen as unnecessary, but during its time, well, they would have had soldiers here to kind of watch over the trade that was going back and forth and to maybe keep peace in the local area. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick look before we get on down the road. From my basic understanding, most Roman forts had pretty much the same basic design during this period. So we're going to go in here to Hardknot and take a quick look. We may not go as in depth as we did with the other one, but we're entering in through the gate here, and with these Roman forts, they had kind of a rectangular playing card layout. Hardknot is a little bit different. If you look at it from the air, it's laid out more as a square. And we don't exactly know why that is. It's probably something to do with the way the land lays. Like they couldn't extend it out as much. So in the last fort, well, we looked at the granaries. So if we step up here, we can see that here on the right hand side, just as at the other place, well, you have these granaries. Again, would have had the wooden floor so that they could keep their food stored and keep it from spoiling. And then if we go on down here, let me just walk down here a little bit. You can see a few other people here today. A lot of people who travel along this route will stop and take a quick look at the Roman fort, just in the same way that I am, and take in the view. So here, again, in the very middle, is the Principia, or the headquarters building. So again, this is where the center of all important activities would have taken place in the fort. It's where commands would be given. It's where major decisions were made. It's where ceremonies would be held. And then if we walk over here, again, on this side, well, we're looking at the Praetorium, or the commander's headquarters, or his house. Here's something at Hardknot that we didn't see at the other fort, and that is a Roman bathhouse. So bathhouses were very popular in the Roman culture, and there was a certain configuration to these things. I think I'm going to wait till we get to the next site to explain it, because I think the ruins at the last fort that we're going to visit are a little bit better preserved. But here's an example of a Roman bathhouse here at Hardknot. And also, let me see if I can get up and get a little better view here. This circular piece right here is called a laconicum. So this was kind of like a sauna that was attached to the bathhouse. Here's one thing that I'm liking about this fort compared to the one where we just were. I'm not trying to be critical of the other fort and put it down. I'm just voicing some preferences here. This one, you can see a lot more of the wall. Now, I think that this wall was kind of rebuilt a little bit in the 1950s from what I read. But here we can walk along this thing and see where one of the towers was on the corner. Now, obviously, it would have been a lot taller. And then from right here, well, we get a good view of the overall fort. Got a few local residents who like to hang out here at the Hardknot fort. They're doing a pretty good job of keeping the vegetation down here inside the fort. And I mentioned that this fort overlooks the Esk Valley. And where we are walking right now, I think would have been where you would have had like the wooden soldier barracks. So obviously, because they are wooden, they aren't here anymore. And we're gonna take a little peek out the front door, the back door, I don't know what you would call it. But take a look at this. This view is absolutely stunning. I'm actually going to walk out here on this point. Again, even though we are far from Rome, if I was one of these Roman soldiers, I don't think I'd be too upset if this is where I'd been posted. Let's walk out here by this tree. But wow. Just take a look at this. Unbelievably beautiful country up here. Well, here's the issue that I'm running into right now is, dang, I could stay right here in this spot all day long. This is one of the most amazing little cuts of God's creation that I've ever seen. Absolutely jaw-dropping. But unfortunately, we can't stay here all day. So we're going to get on down the road and get to our third Roman fortification today. We have made our way over to a place called Ravenglass. This is where the River Esk dumps into the sea. And during the Roman era, well, this would have been the site of a lot of activity. There would have been a lot of trade that would have been happening right here. Right out here in this area would have been a Roman settlement. There was a fort that was located here. Now, all of those things are gone. There are barely any traces of the fort. But one thing that is left is a very well-preserved Roman bathhouse. So right here is the most well-preserved Roman bathhouse in all of England. And for the Romans, the bathhouse was not just a place where you could go and get clean. It wasn't just for hygiene. It was also very much a social gathering and a huge part of Roman life. And the baths had kind of like this specific sequence. We're going to walk through here, and I don't know if I'm going to be in the exact right room when I'm talking about things, but we'll just kind of look at things as we go. So in the bathhouse, you would have had a changing room, and I think that this might be the changing room. If you see this little alcove here, it's possible that that was a place where they might have had like a statue of a Roman god or goddess. And then, well, you would progress through the bathhouse in these different stages. So first you would go into an unheated room called a frigidarium. And then you would go into a warmer room called a tepidarium. You would have had wood floors that were raised off of the ground where heat could circulate below them. And then you would go into a hot room. So the hot room, well, obviously because it's hot, let's walk around this corner and see what we got. Because it's hot, well, that's going to open up your pores and it's going to make you sweat. And as the dirt and everything kind of rises to the surface, well, you would have this toiletry kit that you would bring in with you. You would have bottles of oil, and you would also have these curved metal blades called a strigil, I think is how you pronounce it. I don't know. I probably have that wrong. I read it, but I don't know how correct my pronunciation is. But anyway, you would have these curved metal blades that would be used for scraping the dirt and oil from the skin. And then you would reverse the process and finish it off with a cold plunge. But anyway, yeah, this is the Roman bathhouse here at Ravenglass. All right, well, there you go. Those are a few examples of some Roman fortifications and ruins here in northern England. Really glad that we took the time to go look at these things today. Like I said earlier, this is something that's outside my wheelhouse, which is why I'm here. I'm wanting to try and learn more about this era and about these people. We've got a few other places that we are going to be visiting over the next few days. Going to visit some other Roman sites here in England, maybe a castle or two, and see what we can do to broaden our historical knowledge while we're here in England.